He froze as the alien queen requested a back scrub, but things didn't end there. Brian Reeves stood at attention, his broad shoulders squared as Captain Richard Thorne paced before him in the dimly lit office of the Royal Guard headquarters. The flickering crystal lights cast dancing shadows across the captain's weathered face as he studied the newest addition to his elite unit. "Listen carefully, Reeves." Captain Thorne's gravelly voice carried a hint of, "Was that amusement? Your first assignment is rather unique. You'll be guarding Queen Sylvana tonight." Brian maintained his stoic expression, though his heart quickened slightly at the mention of the alien monarch. Everyone knew of the Verdant Queen's legendary beauty. Her emerald skin and obsidian hair were the subject of countless poems and ballads throughout the galaxy. "I'm honored, sir," Brian responded, keeping his voice neutral. The captain's lips twitched. "Before you accept, there's something you should know. The Queen has particular proclivities when it comes to new guards." Brian raised an eyebrow. "Sir, let's just say she likes to test their professional resolve." The captain cleared his throat. "Your task is simple. Maintain absolute professionalism, regardless of any unusual requests she might make." A warning bell rang in Brian's head. "What kind of requests are we talking about, sir?" The captain's expression remained carefully blank. "Just hold your ground, son. That's all I can say. Do you accept the assignment?" Brian straightened his spine. He hadn't spent 5 years in the Terran Special Forces to be rattled by a simple guard duty, no matter how unconventional. "I accept, sir." "Excellent." Captain Thorne handed him a crystal keycard. "Report to the Royal Wing at 2100 hours, and Reeves—" He paused, a glimmer of mischief in his eyes. "Try not to disappoint Her Majesty too much." 2 hours later, Brian stood in the corner of Queen Sylvana's private chambers, trying to maintain his professional demeanor as the monarch lounged on a plush divan. Her emerald skin seemed to shimmer in the soft light, and her golden corset left little to the imagination. "So silent, my new guard," she purred, stretching languidly. "Are all humans this stoic?" "I speak when spoken to, Your Majesty," Brian replied, keeping his eyes fixed on a point just above her head. She laughed, a melodious sound that sent an involuntary shiver down his spine. "How proper, but surely you can relax a little?" She rose gracefully, her movements fluid like liquid metal. "I'm about to take my evening bath. Would you be so kind as to assist me?" Brian felt heat creep up his neck. "Your Majesty, I don't think that would be appropriate." "Oh," she glided closer, her scent, something exotic and intoxicating, filling his nostrils. "Are you refusing a direct order from your queen?" "I'm here to protect you, Your Majesty, not to—" He trailed off as she stepped into his personal space. "Not to what?" Her golden eyes sparkled with amusement. "I merely need help reaching a particularly troublesome spot on my back. Unless—" She tilted her head. "You're imagining something more inappropriate?" Brian swallowed hard. This had to be the test the captain mentioned. "Your Majesty, perhaps one of your handmaidens." "They've all been dismissed for the evening." She cut him off smoothly. "It's just you and me, Brian Reeves." The way she said his name made his uniform feel suddenly too tight. "Your Majesty, I must respectfully decline." "Must you?" She was so close now he could feel the heat radiating from her body. "Even if I make it a royal command?" Before he could respond, a chime echoed through the chamber. The Queen's communication panel was flashing urgently. "How inconvenient," she sighed, stepping away. "Duty calls, it seems, but don't think we're finished here, my stubborn guard." As she moved to answer the call, Brian released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Something told him this was going to be a very long night. Queen Sylvana turned away from the communication panel, her golden eyes sparkling with amusement. "Just a reminder about tomorrow's Trade Council meeting," she said, stretching languorously. How terribly mundane. Brian maintained his rigid posture as she glided past him toward the ornate bathing chamber. The room was a marvel of alien architecture, with crystalline walls that seemed to pulse with soft, ethereal light. Steam rose from a pool carved into the floor, its surface rippling with iridescent patterns. "You know," she called over her shoulder, "I'm still waiting for that assistance I requested." Brian cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, I must remind you—" "Oh, spare me the protocol speech," she laughed, her voice echoing off the crystal walls. "Did Captain Thorne warn you about me? I bet he did. He always does." The sound of rustling fabric made Brian fix his gaze firmly on a distant wall. "He mentioned you might test new guards." "Test? Is that what he called it?" Her laughter turned musical. "I suppose that's one way to put it, though I prefer to think of it as cultural exchange." The splash of water indicated she'd entered the pool. Brian steadfastly maintained his position, even as she called out, "You can look now." "I'm decent." "Well, by verdant standards, anyway." Reluctantly, he turned. The queen was submerged to her shoulders in the shimmering water, her obsidian hair floating around her like a dark halo. Her emerald skin seemed to glow in the crystal light. "Come closer," she beckoned. "I promise I won't bite, unless you ask nicely." Fighting back a blush, Brian approached the pool's edge. "Your Majesty—" "Sylvana," she corrected. "When we're alone, I prefer Sylvana. That wouldn't be appropriate." "You humans and your rigid propriety," she sighed. "Did you know last month's guard actually fainted when I asked him to wash my hair?" Despite himself, Brian felt his lips twitch. "Fainted?" "Face first into the pool," she confirmed, eyes dancing with mischief. "Poor thing had to be rescued by my handmaidens. He requested a transfer the next day." "I can't imagine why," Brian deadpanned, earning another melodious laugh. "Oh, I like you," she declared. "You have, what's that charming human expression? Spunk? I believe the word you're looking for is professionalism." Boring word, she wrinkled her nose. "Now, about that back rub." Before he could protest, she turned, presenting her bare back to him. The emerald skin was adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and swirl in the light. "Your marking," he found himself saying, "they're beautiful." "They tell our life story," she explained. "Each pattern represents a significant moment or achievement." She glanced over her shoulder, eyes twinkling. "Would you like to know what they mean?" Brian knew he should refuse. Every instinct honed from years of military training screamed at him to maintain professional distance. Instead, he found himself kneeling at the pool's edge. "This one," she guided his hand to a spiral pattern between her shoulder blades, "marks my coronation." Her skin was impossibly smooth and warm beneath his fingers. As he traced the pattern, she continued, "And this one represents my first diplomatic victory. Did you know I once talked down a Centaurian war fleet, using nothing but badly translated poetry?" "Somehow that doesn't surprise me," Brian murmured, his fingers following the flowing lines of her markings. She hummed appreciatively. "You have talented hands for a soldier. Tell me, what other skills are you hiding?" "Your Maj, Sylvana," he corrected at her pointed look. "You're making this very difficult." "That's rather the point," she purred. "You should have seen the guard from 2 months ago. He tried to maintain his stoic facade while reciting the entire security protocol manual. Backwards? Did it work?" "He made it through 3 chapters before I got him to sing a love ballad instead." Brian couldn't help chuckling. "You're impossible." "I prefer creatively persistent," she countered, leaning back slightly into his touch. "Though you're proving to be quite the challenge yourself. Most guards have either fled or succumbed to my charms by now." "Perhaps your charms are losing their potency," he suggested, immediately regretting his boldness. But Sylvana merely laughed, the sound sending pleasant vibrations through his fingers where they rested against her skin. "Oh, my dear Brian, I'm just getting started." She turned in the water, facing him fully. Droplets clung to her emerald skin like diamonds, and her eyes held a predatory gleam that made his breath catch. "You see," she continued, moving closer to the pool's edge, "I've learned that humans are fascinating creatures, so bound by their rules and protocols, yet capable of such passion when those barriers finally break." "Is that what this is about?" he asked, voice rougher than he's intended. "Breaking barriers?" "Among other things," she smiled enigmatically. "Tell me, Brian, have you ever wondered why a queen would spend so much time testing her guards?" Before he could respond, she reached up, her wet fingers trailing along his jaw. "Perhaps I'm not testing them at all. Perhaps I'm searching for something, or someone." The intensity in her golden eyes made his heart race. "What are you searching for?" Her smile turned mysterious. "Would you like to find out?" "I'm not sure that would be wise," Brian managed, though he didn't pull away from her touch. Wisdom is overrated, she murmured. Do you know what the previous guard said when I told him that? He quoted the entire Royal Guard handbook on appropriate conduct, every single page. Despite the tension crackling between them, Brian couldn't suppress a grin. And how did that work out for him? He's now stationed at the furthest outpost in the kingdom, guarding a storage facility for ceremonial headwear. Her fingers traced a path down his neck. Such a waste of potential. Is that a threat, Your Majesty? Sylvana, she corrected automatically. And no, merely an observation. Though I must say your resilience is intriguing. Most humans find it difficult to resist our natural pheromones. That explained the intoxicating scent that had been clouding his senses. Military-grade neural suppressants, he admitted. Standard issue for human guards in alien courts. Her eyes widened with delight. How deliciously clever! So your resistance isn't just willpower. You've actually come prepared. We aim to please. Oh, I'm sure you do, she purred, her hand now resting on his chest. Though I wonder, do those suppressants block everything, or just the obvious effects? No, Brian swallowed hard. The suppressants dulled the overwhelming impact of alien pheromones, but they did nothing to counter the very human attraction he felt toward her wit, intelligence, and charisma. You're thinking very hard about something, she observed, amusement dancing in her eyes. Care to share? I'm thinking about proper security protocols, he lied smoothly. Liar, she laughed. Your pulse just quickened. I can feel it under my fingers. Her expression turned thoughtful. You know, you're the first guard who's managed to maintain an actual conversation with me. Usually by this point, they're either babbling incoherently or running for the door. Perhaps your standards are too low. The words slipped out before he could stop them. But rather than take offense, Sylvana threw her head back and laughed, the sound echoing off the crystal walls. Oh, you are dangerous, she declared with evident delight. Handsome, composed, and clever. Tell me, Brian Reeves, what am I to do with you? Your Majesty could always try treating me like a proper guard, he suggested, knowing even as he said it that it was futile. Boring, she dismissed. Besides, I think we both know you're far more than just a guard. The neural suppressants alone prove you came expecting complications. Her fingers traced idle patterns on his chest, mimicking the markings on her own skin. I wonder what other preparations you've made. What other surprises you're hiding? That would be classified information. Everything interesting usually is, she sighed dramatically. Though I must say, your dedication to maintaining protocol is admirable. Frustrating, but admirable. She leaned closer, her breath ghosting across his skin. Would it help if I made it a royal command? With all due respect, Your Majesty, Brian replied, proud of how steady his voice remained. Some things transcend even royal authority. How diplomatic, she murmured. And yet you haven't moved away. It was true. Despite every regulation screaming through his mind, he remained kneeling at the pool's edge, her hand still resting over his thundering heart, her golden eyes locked with his, a predatory gleam flickering in their depths. You know what I think? She whispered, leaning closer. I think you're enjoying our little game far more than you're willing to admit. In one fluid motion, Sylvana rose slightly from the water, closing the distance between them. Before Brian could react, her delicate fingers slipped beneath his belt, making him freeze in place. His face flushed crimson as her touch sent electric shivers through his body. My, she purred, a knowing smile playing across her lips. It seems I was right about you after all. Such impressive qualifications. Brian's breath caught in his throat as he struggled to maintain his composure. The Queen's golden eyes sparkled with mischief and satisfaction. I'll have to recommend you to Captain Thorne for special assignments, she murmured, withdrawing her hand with deliberate slowness. You've certainly proven yourself more than capable. Her touch lingered like a phantom sensation, making it difficult for him to focus on anything else. The playful confidence in her expression suggested she knew exactly what effect she was having on him. Perhaps, she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, we should explore why that is. After all, it would be a shame to let such potential go to waste. The sudden chime of the evening bells saved him from having to respond. Sylvana sighed, pulling back slightly. The universe conspires against me, she lamented theatrically. That would be my reminder that the Trade Council meets at dawn. Her eyes locked with his, filled with promise. We'll have to continue this cultural exchange. Another time, Brian stood, grateful for the excuse to put some distance between them. Shall I summon your handmaidens, Your Majesty? So formal again, she clicked her tongue disapprovingly. But yes, I suppose you better had. Though, Brian, she waited until he met her gaze. Don't think this is over. I've only just begun to play. As he strode toward the chamber doors, her laughter followed him, rich with promise and challenge. Something told him his knights as royal guard were about to become very interesting indeed. So, Reeves? Captain Thorne's gravelly voice carried a hint of amusement as he leaned back in his office chair the next morning. How was your first night on royal duty? Brian maintained his professional stance, though he could feel heat threatening to creep up his neck. Uneventful, sir. Uneventful? The captain's eyebrow arched skeptically. That's not what I heard. Sir? The Queen specifically requested you for tonight's shift, Thorne chuckled. She rarely does that unless… He trailed off meaningfully. Brian cleared his throat. Unless what, sir? Unless she's found someone interesting? The captain's eyes twinkled. Care to explain why our sovereign finds you so… fascinating? I simply perform my duties as required, sir. Did these duties include any unusual requests? Brian fought to keep his expression neutral as memories of warm emerald skin and golden eyes flashed through his mind. Nothing I couldn't handle professionally, sir. The captain's laughter filled the office. Professionally, eh? That's a new one. Most guards can't string two coherent sentences together after their first night with Her Majesty. Perhaps they weren't properly prepared, sir. Yes, those neural suppressants. Thorne nodded approvingly. Clever thinking, Reeves, though I wonder if there'll be enough. Sir, let's just say Her Majesty can be creative when she sets her mind to something. The captain's expression turned serious. Or someone. Before Brian could respond, a messenger appeared at the door with his evening assignment scroll. The captain's eyes crinkled with mirth as he read it. Well, it seems the Queen has requested your presence for her evening entertainment. She's hosting a private performance of the traditional verdant dance of… Oh my. The captain's eyebrows shot up as he read further. This should be interesting. Hours later, Brian stood at attention in the Queen's private entertainment chamber, trying to maintain his composure as Sylvana reclined on her ornate chaise lounge. She traded her usual golden corset for something even more provocative, a shimmering dress that seemed to be made of living starlight. Do you know anything about verdant dance traditions, Brian? She asked, gesturing for him to approach. Only what's covered in basic diplomatic training, Your Majesty. Sylvana, she corrected automatically. And I doubt your training covered this particular dance. Her golden eyes sparkled with mischief. It's traditionally performed for potential mates. Brian felt his pulse quicken. I see. Do you? She rose gracefully, moving to the center of the chamber. The dance tells a story of pursuit and resistance. The dancer attempts to seduce their chosen partner through increasingly elaborate displays, while the partner must remain completely still. And if they move, her smile turned predatory, then they forfeit the game and must submit to the dancer's wishes. The implications hung heavy in the air between them. And you expect me to participate in this tradition? Participate? Oh no, my dear Brian. She gestured to a chair positioned in the center of the room. You merely have to watch and remain perfectly still. As he reluctantly took his seat, ethereal music began to fill the chamber. Sylvana moved with liquid grace, her dress catching the light like captured stars. Each movement was precisely calculated to draw his eye, to test his resolve. The dance has 7 stages, she explained as she moved around him, each more challenging than the last. No human has ever made it past stage 3. The first stage seemed innocent enough, elegant turns and graceful gestures that merely highlighted her natural beauty. But as the music shifted, so did the dance's intensity. During the second stage, she moved closer, her fingers occasionally brushing against him as she passed. Each fleeting touch sent electricity through his body, making it increasingly difficult to remain motionless. Still so controlled, she murmured appreciatively. Let's see how you handle stage 3. The music took on a hypnotic quality as she began incorporating traditional verdant pheromone release points into her movements. Even through his suppressants, Brian could feel their effect, making his head swim with desire. "Your heart is racing," she observed, trailing her fingers along his jaw. "But you haven't moved an inch. Impressive." The fourth stage brought her even closer, her body moving in ways that seemed to defy physics. The starlight dress shimmered and shifted, revealing tantalizing glimpses of emerald skin. "Do you know," she whispered near his ear, "that you're the first to experience this stage in over a century?" Brian focused on his breathing, using every bit of his military training to remain still as she danced around him. Her scent, her touch, her very presence threatened to overwhelm his senses. "Most fascinating," she purred. "Your control is remarkable, even as your body betrays your desire." Her hand traced the tension in his shoulders. "Shall we try stage 5? The music changed again, becoming something primal and intense. Sylvana's movements became more intimate, more deliberately provocative. The starlight dress seemed to respond to her emotions, pulsing with an inner light that matched the racing of Brian's heart. "The fifth stage traditionally marks the point where most verdant nobles surrender," she explained, her breath hot against his neck. "The combination of dance, pheromones, and physical proximity usually proves too much to resist." Yet Brian remained motionless. Though every muscle in his body screamed for release, sweat beaded on his forehead as he fought against his natural instincts. "Stage 6, she announced with delighted anticipation. "I haven't performed this one in, well, never for a human." The dance became something beyond seduction, an art form that seemed to tap directly into primal desires. The starlight dress appeared to merge with her emerald skin, creating an effect that made it impossible to tell where fabric ended and flesh began. "Your suppressants must be at their limit," she observed, noting his quickened breathing. Yet still you resist. Why?" Through gritted teeth, he managed professional pride. Her laughter was rich with appreciation. "Oh, my dear Brian, you are truly unique." She paused her dance, standing before him with eyes that glowed like molten gold. "Would you like to know what stage 7 entails? I have a feeling you'll tell me regardless." "The final stage is performed only for one's chosen mate," she said softly. "It's considered a sacred tradition among my people. No outsider has ever witnessed it." Their eyes locked, and in that moment Brian understood the true nature of her test. This wasn't just about seduction or games. She was offering him something profound, something beyond mere physical attraction. "Your Majesty," he began. "Careful," she warned. "If you move even slightly while speaking, you forfeit." "Sylvana," he corrected himself, voice rough with restraint. "Are you certain you want to share something so sacred with an outsider?" Her expression softened. "Perhaps that's precisely why I want to share it with you." She moved closer until her lips nearly brushed his ear. "The question is, can you maintain your legendary control through the final stage?" The music shifted one last time, becoming something otherworldly and beautiful. As Sylvana began the 7th stage of the dance, Brian realized that all his training, all his preparation, might not be enough to resist what was to come. But perhaps, just perhaps, that wasn't such a bad thing after all. As the 7th stage of the Verdun dance reached its crescendo, the chamber's crystalline walls seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Sylvana's movements had transcended mere seduction, becoming something profound and ancient. The starlight dress now appeared to be pure energy flowing around her emerald form. Suddenly, a sharp chime cut through the ethereal music. "Your Majesty," a voice called urgently through the communication panel. "The Centaurian ambassador requests an immediate audience. It's regarding the trade negotiations." Sylvana paused mid-motion, her golden eyes locked with Brian's. The interruption had broken neither their connection nor the mounting tension between them. "Tell the ambassador I'll receive him in 1 hour," she commanded, never looking away from Brian. Some traditions cannot be rushed. As the final notes of the sacred dance filled the chamber, something extraordinary happened. The crystalline walls began to resonate in harmony with the music, creating a cascade of light that enveloped both of them. Brian felt an ancient power stirring, something beyond physical attraction or mere desire. "Do you feel it?" Sylvana whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "The verdant bonding resonance. It hasn't manifested for an outsider in centuries." Brian could indeed feel it, a profound connection forming between them, transcending species and protocol. His neural suppressants, overwhelmed by the combination of the dance and the resonance, finally gave way to something far more powerful than mere pheromones. "Gosh, this is why I chose you," she continued, moving closer. "Humans possess something we've lost, an ability to forge connections that defy explanation. Your species' capacity for adaptation, for breaking boundaries while maintaining their essential nature. It's magnificent." The resonance grew stronger, the crystal walls humming with energy. Brian realized he was no longer trying to resist. Not the dance, not the connection, not her. Some choices transcended duty and protocol. "The Centaurian crisis can wait," Sylvana murmured, her fingers tracing the patterns of light dancing across his skin. "Some moments demand priority." What followed was both ancient and new, a merging of verdant tradition and human passion. The starlight dress dissolved into pure energy, leaving only the sacred patterns of her life story etched in luminescent lines across her emerald skin. Their connection, physical and spiritual, defied conventional understanding. Later, as they lay entwined on silk cushions, the crystal walls still humming with residual energy, Sylvana traced new patterns forming on her skin, patterns that told the story of their union. "The resonance has marked us both," she observed, studying similar patterns that had appeared on Brian's chest. "Among my people, this is considered the deepest form of bonding. It cannot be undone." "Do you regret it?" Brian asked, running his fingers along the luminescent lines that now connected their markings. She laughed softly. "Regret achieving what generations of my ancestors could only dream of? The sacred texts speak of a time when Verdants could bond with other species, sharing strength and wisdom. We thought those days were lost forever, until a human guard came along and ruined your dance ritual." "Oh, my dear Brian," she smiled, her golden eyes glowing with affection. "You didn't ruin anything. You completed it. The seventh stage isn't about resistance. It's about knowing when to surrender to something greater than ourselves." The communication panel chimed again, more insistently this time. Sylvana sighed, but her expression remained serene. "The Centaurians can be quite persistent," she said, rising gracefully. The starlight dress rematerialized around her, though now it seemed to incorporate the new patterns that marked their bond. "Shall we see what crisis demands our attention?" Brian raised an eyebrow. "Our attention? You're my bonded mate now," she reminded him with a mischievous smile. "That comes with certain diplomatic responsibilities. I'm not sure that's covered in the guard training manual." "Then we'll write a new chapter," she declared, extending her hand to him. "After all, we've already rewritten several ancient laws of my people. What's one more human protocol between mates?" As Brian took her hand, he noticed the crystal walls pulse in harmony with their combined heartbeats. Whatever challenges lay ahead, diplomatic, cultural, or personal, they would face them together, their bond a testament to the extraordinary potential that existed when boundaries were transcended with love and respect. "Besides," Sylvana added with a playful glint in her eyes, "wait until the Centaurians realize they're negotiating with a human verdant bonded pair. Their tentacles will tie themselves in knots." As they prepared to face the diplomatic crisis together, Brian reflected on how a simple guard duty had evolved into something that would reshape both their lives and possibly their civilizations. All because he'd frozen when an alien queen requested a back scrub, and things definitely hadn't ended there. News of the unprecedented human verdant bonding spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, the palace was inundated with diplomatic inquiries, scientific requests, and media speculation. The crystal walls of the royal chambers, still resonating with the energy of their bond, now seemed to pulse in rhythm with the growing excitement throughout the kingdom. Captain Thorne's expression was priceless when Brian reported for duty the morning after the bonding. The gruff commander took one look at the luminescent patterns adorning his guard's skin and promptly dropped his morning coffee. "By all the stars," Thorne whispered, studying the sacred markings. "You actually did it. You crazy son of a... You actually bonded with her." "It wasn't exactly planned, sir," Brian admitted, adjusting his uniform collar to cover some of the more obvious patterns. "Planned?" Thorne barked out a laugh. "Reeves, nothing about this was in any plan. Do you have any idea what you've done, the implications?" Before Brian could respond, a royal messenger burst into the office, face flushed with excitement. "Captain, the Andromeda Scientific Council requests an immediate audience with the Queen's human mate." Thorne's eyebrows shot up. Already? That was fast. And that's not all, the messenger continued, practically bouncing. The Pleiadian Cultural Exchange wants to document the bonding patterns, the Orion Medical Institute is requesting DNA samples, and the Syrian Diplomatic Corps is demanding to know if this affects existing treaties. Tell them all to get in line, a familiar voice commanded from the doorway. Sylvana glided into the office, her starlight dress now permanently incorporating their shared bonding patterns. The sight of her still took Brian's breath away. Your Majesty, Thorne and the messenger bowed deeply. Oh, stop that, she waved dismissively. We have more pressing matters to discuss than protocol. Her golden eyes found Brian's, sparkling with barely contained excitement. Like the fact that human-verdant compatibility appears to extend beyond mere bonding. Brian felt his heart skip a beat. What do you mean? Her smile was radiant as she took his hand, placing it over her abdomen where new patterns were forming. Patterns unlike any in recorded verdant history. It seemed, oh no, she said softly, that our passionate nights together have yielded unexpected fruit. The royal physicians confirmed it this morning when I'm carrying our child. The crystal walls erupted in a symphony of light, responding to the surge of emotions from both bondmates. Captain Thorne collapsed into his chair, while the messenger fainted outright. That's impossible, Thorne stammered. The genetic differences... Apparently, Sylvana's eyes danced with amusement. Nobody informed human biology that it was supposed to be impossible. Your species continues to amaze us, my love. Brian felt overwhelmed by a rush of emotions. Joy, fear, wonder, and something deeper that resonated through their bond. The patterns on their skin brightened in response, creating a light show that put the crystal walls to shame. The council will have opinions about this, Thorne warned, though he couldn't quite hide his smile. The council can form a committee to discuss their opinions, Sylvana declared. In the meantime, I have more important matters to attend to. She tugged Brian toward the door. Come, my love. The royal physicians are eager to study how human passion managed to overcome millennia of supposed biological barriers. Is that really necessary? Brian asked as they left Thorne's office. Oh, absolutely not, she grinned mischievously, but I do so enjoy watching them try to maintain their scientific composure while documenting our compatibility. Their laughter echoed through the palace corridors, accompanied by the harmonic resonance of their bond. Guards and courtiers alike stopped to stare at the sight of their queen practically glowing with joy, her human mate's hand protectively resting over their growing miracle. Later that evening, as they lay tangled in silk sheets, their bonding patterns creating constellation-like displays on the chamber walls, Sylvana traced the newest markings appearing on her skin. The physicians are baffled, she murmured contentedly. They can't explain how human reproductive methods prove so effective when centuries of verdant genetic engineering failed. Maybe that's the problem, Brian suggested, running his fingers through her obsidian hair. You tried to engineer it instead of letting nature take its course. And what a delightful course it took, she purred, pressing closer to him. Though I must say your stamina is rather extraordinary, even by human standards. The neural suppressants weren't suppressing everything, were they? Brian grinned. Special forces training has its advantages. Indeed, she agreed, her golden eyes darkening with desire. Perhaps we should conduct some more research, for scientific purposes, of course. Of course, he murmured, pulling her into a passionate kiss as the crystal walls began their now familiar harmonic resonance. Anything for science? The next morning, as news of the pregnancy spread throughout the galaxy, the palace was flooded with even more requests for audiences and studies. Species that had long viewed humans as primitive or inferior suddenly found themselves reevaluating their stance. They're calling it the human factor, Sylvana reported, reading through the morning's diplomatic messages. Apparently, your species' ability to adapt and connect in ways that defy conventional wisdom has caught everyone's attention. They're not going to want to study that too, are they? Brian asked warily. Her laugh was rich with promise. Oh, my love, they can study all they want. But some mysteries are meant to remain between mates. She pulled him close, so their bonding patterns synchronizing in a dazzling display. Now, shall we give them something else to speculate about? As their passion ignited once again, Brian reflected on how a simple guard duty had evolved into something that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of human potential. And to think, It all started with a back scrub request that left him frozen in shock, though things certainly hadn't ended there. As Sylvana's pregnancy progressed, the crystal walls of the palace began responding to not just two, but three distinct energy signatures. Their unborn child's presence manifested in swirling patterns of light that danced between the established resonances of its parents' bond, creating symphonies of color that left visiting dignitaries speechless. "The baby's doing it again," Brian murmured one evening, watching as their chambers transformed into a kaleidoscope of shifting lights. His hand rested on Sylvana's swollen belly, feeling the pulse of energy beneath her emerald skin. "She's strong," Sylvana smiled, placing her hand over his. "The physicians say she's developing abilities they've never seen before. Human adaptability combined with verdant energy manipulation. She's writing her own genetic code." The pregnancy had been a journey of discovery, their passionate nights together continuing to strengthen their bond while nurturing the miraculous life they'd created. Each intimate moment seemed to enhance their connection, their shared pleasure resonating through the crystal walls and adding new patterns to their bonding marks. Captain Thorne had been promoted to Royal Security Advisor, partly to help manage the increasing number of diplomatic requests and scientific delegations seeking audience with the unprecedented couple. His gruff exterior had softened considerably since learning he would be the child's honorary grandfather. "Never thought I'd see the day," he admitted during one of their evening briefings. A human guard and an alien queen rewriting the laws of biology through good old-fashioned, he cleared his throat, traditional methods. The palace physicians had been particularly fascinated by how human reproductive approaches had succeeded where centuries of advanced genetic engineering had failed. Their clinical observations often dissolved into embarrassed coughing fits when Sylvana cheerfully detailed the enthusiastic frequency of their intimate encounters. "You enjoy making them blush," Brian accused playfully after one such session. "Almost as much as I enjoy making you blush," she countered, pulling him into a passionate kiss that set the crystal walls humming. Though that's becoming increasingly difficult these days. Indeed, their initial dynamic of seductress on queen and stoic guard had evolved into something far more balanced. Two souls perfectly matched, their desire for each other tempered by deep love and respect. As Sylvana's due date approached, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Representatives from every major species gathered in the capital, eager to witness the birth of a child that symbolized unprecedented possibility. The actual delivery exceeded all expectations. As their daughter entered the world, every crystal structure in the palace erupted in a spectacular light show, responding to the perfect fusion of human and verdant energy she embodied. The sacred patterns that marked her parents' bond manifested on her skin in brilliant gold against a background that shifted between human pink and verdant green. "She's perfect," Brian whispered, cradling their daughter while Sylvana rested against him, though I'm not sure the palace infrastructure was quite prepared for her arrival. Indeed, their daughter's birth had overloaded several crystal matrices, leaving parts of the palace in creative disarray. No one seemed to mind, too captivated by the miracle she represented. "The council is already talking about updating the succession laws," Sylvana mentioned, watching their daughter manipulate light patterns with her tiny fingers. "It seems our little one has made quite an impression. Like mother, like daughter." Brian grinned, remembering how a certain queen had once impressed him with her own manipulation of light during a sacred dance. "I seem to recall you did some impressing of your own," she purred, pulling him down for a kiss that quickly deepened into something more passionate. Their daughter chose that moment to create a miniature aurora borealis in the nursery, prompting laughter from both parents. "Definitely your daughter," Brian chuckled. "Already knows how to make an entrance." As peace settled over the royal chambers, the three of them cocooned in the gentle resonance of their shared bond. Sylvana traced the original pattern that had started it all, the mark of their first intimate encounter, still visible among the constellation of symbols that now covered their skin. "To think," she mused, "all of this began because I requested a back scrub from my new guard. And I froze like an idiot," Brian added, pulling her closer. But things certainly didn't end there," she reminded him, her golden eyes darkening with familiar desire. "In fact, I'd say we're still just beginning." Their daughter's contented coo seemed to agree, her tiny hands creating patterns of light that merged seamlessly with the resonance of their bond. The crystal walls pulsed in harmony, celebrating the union of two souls whose love had transcended biological barriers and cultural differences to create something extraordinary. As news of their daughter's abilities spread throughout the galaxy, more humans were invited to serve in alien courts. Their unique adaptability and capacity for connection now recognized as valuable traits. The success of Brian and Sylvana's union had opened doors previously thought sealed by biological incompatibility. "We've started quite a trend," Brian observed, watching reports of other human-alien couples following in their footsteps. "We've started a revolution," Sylvana corrected, her eyes sparkling. "Though I must say, I doubt any of them are quite as enthusiastic about traditional human methods as we are." "Care to test that theory?" he murmured, pulling her into an embrace that immediately set the crystal walls singing. Their daughter's nursery automatically dimmed its lights. A feature hastily installed after several embarrassing interruptions had demonstrated her inherited sensitivity to her parents' passionate energy. As they came together once again, their bond resonating with love and desire, both reflected on how a simple guard duty had evolved into a galaxy-changing legacy. Their daughter slept peacefully nearby, her dreams painting the crystal walls with possibilities yet to come. The story that began with a frozen moment of shock had blossomed into an epic tale of love, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys start with the simplest requests. And as Brian and Sylvana's passion continued to defy conventional wisdom, their love story became legend, a testament to humanity's remarkable ability to adapt, connect, and transform the very fabric of reality through the power of genuine love.